and priorities. I see that we have quorum, and I call this meeting to order. First order of business is the adoption of the agenda. And everybody has seen it. Any changes to the agenda? Okay. Moved by Councillor Clark, seconded by Councillor Papp, that the agenda for November 19 regular meeting of Policies and Priorities Committee be adopted. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? That carries. Disclosure of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof. Any declarations? Seeing none, I have none. Duly recorded, please, Madam Clerk. Okay, we have an issue sheet for item 5.1. Moved by Councillor Papp, second by Councillor Clark, that the issue sheet for agenda item 5.1 regarding the Summerfest Committee terms of reference be received, and that Policy and Priorities Committee recommend that Council adopt the amended Summerfest Committee terms of reference. Open to the floor for discussion. Councillor Papp.
Well, I'll start it. I understand to some extent the logic behind changing the terms of reference and the committee membership, but I do have some concerns about removing the membership of a town councillor on this particular committee, and would request that that be included in a different capacity. If I don't want to create, and also having a staff member as chair of the committee would open up the door for several other committees that we as councillors are involved in, where in which case staff would be, it's a suggestion is the staff is going to step in that regard. So I'll get it started because I know there are some concerns.
Okay, the concern is that a member of council will be deleted from the membership of this committee, and the concern is that this may be a domino effect, that other committees may be affected and members of council will not be sitting on that. For example, say the active transportation or the community policing or the Chamber of Commerce and so on and so forth. So this is where the discussion will open. Any other comments? Mr. CAO, perhaps you can elaborate on the rationale behind this, and then that'll give us a little more meat to discuss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To answer the concern, the recommendation here is not to remove all councillors from all committees. That's not what the idea is. What the idea is if you have a festival committee like this one, where it's a community committee that's tasked with doing or delivering certain community events, as I've indicated before, it's problematic to have a councillor appointed to the committee because then the councillor is in a conflict between administrative work and governance work. And I think that those two, as I've indicated in previous meetings, should be very clearly separated. It's not to suggest a councillor can't be a volunteer and have an important role within the volunteer group or the delivery of a program or festival. It's just to be appointed by council puts particular concerns for staff in the area of conflict between governance and administration. The other part of the recommendation on this is that we've had some internal issues with regards to the amount of staff that are involved in the planning. We wanted to open that up a little bit. I've had discussions with the Summerfest Committee who have been very welcoming to the suggestion of greater staff involvement. First of all, the benefit to the committee is that it takes the work off of their shoulders. Benefit to the town is that we're participating from the front end, so that things like purchasing and logistics and venue setup and organization, which we do anyway, we're in at the front end, and we know clearly what our role and responsibility is in delivering the festival. The recommendation that I think that more clearly the director of Recreation, Culture, and Wellness would act as the chair of the committee, and that's a logistical benefit to the community, I guess you could say, in terms of it takes less responsibility away or takes some more of the responsibility off the volunteers and lets them focus on specific items at hand. So what, in essence, we would have is a situation where each member of the committee would have somewhat of a portfolio that they would be tasked with delivering. So if it's finance representative would be tasked with doing the purchasing for the committee or for the festival. And then it may be marketing and advertising, it may be fundraising. So there's all sorts of different components to this, and that would be discussed at the inaugural meeting of the festival, and the work divided up that way.
Hearing that this is a one-off type thing as far as a representative from
Yeah,
council.
if there's a request for a councillor to sit on an external committee such as the Chamber of Commerce, that makes very good sense, and it certainly should be a role of a councillor to do that. If we're talking about a community festival like Canada Day, should a councillor sit on that committee? My recommendation would be no, because council's role again is on the governance side. So simply put, council says we want Canada Day, staff delivers Canada Day. And that's part of the motivation logic behind setting up the wellness, the cultural, recreational department, if you will, as a standalone, so that it can do the actual work and deliver the things council wants done. Community policing, certainly a councillor would sit on that and would continue to do so as representing the town in a larger issue, an external agency.
Thank you, Mr. CAO. Other questions or comments? Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'm of two minds of this, and maybe my colleagues around the table are as well. Certainly, I think the adding the staff to this committee will be beneficial, because really, in the past, the committee itself, which was made up essentially of volunteers and one staff member, if we look at the terms of reference, it says, will organize and develop. We've made this change, as the CAO indicated, with a new director here, congratulations, effective January 1st. But that director will oversee the organization and development. So what the CAO is essentially, I understand, Mr. Chair, what the CAO is indicating is that this committee will organize and develop it. But really, we're, on the other side, Pelham is blessed with volunteers. Volunteers that have really moved this community forward, and as was said, as I said, on behalf of the community and council at our special volunteer recognition, the volunteers organize the significant events in our community. And that's why they're on this group. I think what the volunteers have done is really beyond, through the years of this Summerfest committee, beyond what one might sort of expect. Absolutely, and that's why there was a huge success. And indeed, Mr. Chair, the Councillor Kersey, went above and beyond the call of duty to involvement in this committee. But I think the CAO has indicated some of the areas specifically where volunteers from the community can be involved. Should volunteers be there overseeing a road closure? No, I think that's sort of staff work. But should volunteers be there interacting with those that are setting up? Absolutely. Displays and all of that. Volunteers there to get sponsorship dollars, absolutely. To MC the event, absolutely. So I think what we're looking at here, Mr. Chair, is how does one best achieve that goal of a wonderful event that is organized and it is embodied by the staff, and so all staff are involved and know what's going on. It's important to have finance there. It's important to have public works there, facilities, yet at the same time honor the commitment and really utilize, as we've talked about in our strategic planning, the real power and drive and commitment of volunteers in the community. Does this new terms of reference meet that? I think it's going a long way to that. But conceivably, the committee could have a fundraising committee that could be populated by volunteers, or it could have a a separate committee that just oversees the setup of, and the organization of the setup of downtown, or bands, you know, nothing against Ms. Van Ravensway, but often volunteers in the community know which bands will work, et cetera, right? And as we see with the band shell, it's volunteers in the community that organize those bands. Should a counselor be involved? Not sure. I think certainly Councillor Kersey has shown us that his involvement was, you know, as with others, has led to the success of this event. I don't think the counselor should be the chair of the committee, however. I think the interesting dynamic will be next year when reports come, Mr. Chair, about Summerfest. They won't be reports from Councillor Kersey anymore, or whoever that council rep is, if there is a council rep. There'll be reports from staff. And that's the change that we've made here with the new director, and that's the focus of our strategic plan. So what have I said, Mr. Chair? I've said a lot of words about volunteers and their commitment, but in terms of a settling down, as I said, I'm of two minds. I certainly agree that if there is a council rep, that representative should not be the chair. But should there be a council rep there? You know, I look forward to hearing from my colleagues on that. But I think that's sound work in terms of what the staff are proposing here. The final thing I would say, Mr. Chair, is I think the other thing behind it is what we're doing this evening. All councillors involved in priorities and planning, all councillors involved in committee of the whole, as opposed to a councillor who's the Canada Day councillor and kind of holds the reins of the Canada Day councillor. And if a member of council wants to know what's going on, you speak to that councillor. I'm pointing to Councillor Rubiak because he happens to be the representative on that committee. So I do see the rationale for it, and I look forward to hearing from colleagues around it. I'd be supportive of what's being recommended. I'd also be supportive of, I think at this point, of a councillor being on that committee, but I look forward to hearing from colleagues. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So what I'm hearing is that staff will take the lead on this, and if necessary, have subcommittees, which will include maybe members of council as volunteers to work on subcommittees in order to move the event forward. Is this what I'm hearing?
They could, I mean, Mr. Chair, we could hear from Ms. Van Ravensway. It's, you know, she's the one that's going to be overseeing this, and her vision for this. I'd welcome that, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
Yeah, in reviewing this, we really wanted to bring out the work that our volunteers do, because without them, it wouldn't exist. And also identify that we do need staff expertise on the committee more than what we've had in the past. Because it's just, you know, a major event. We do recommend that there are subcommittees formed as part of the committee, and each subcommittee has a chair, and they report back to the committee. I know that with everything that Councillor Kersey has done in the past, you know, he will that will be missed, and it's a council decision whether a councillor would be sitting on the committee or ex officio. I'm not quite sure how that would work. I think it's workable the way it is, and it has been identified that the committee, on behalf of the town of Pelham, the committee will organize the Summerfest, and that was a issue that needed to be identified. What was the Summerfest committee? Was it a community committee, or was it a committee of council?
That's the core of the question. What exactly is it? And I can't recall. Is it, Madam Clerk, a committee of council or an ad hoc? I can't remember how we set it up, if in fact we did set up in any way. If I may, through you, Mr. Chair.
Yep, absolutely.
Well, through you, Mr. Chair, the terms of reference were approved by council.
So it's a committee.
And the appointments to the committee were appointed by council.
So, if I may, let's just keep this logic going, because I just want to be, I'm learning from the training of keeping things simple, but also putting them in the right spots. So the difference between, we'll use the Canada Day Festival. Councillor Ribbiak sits there as our representative, right? Okay, and he is, if we use the same logic, that committee is driven by staff. Is that fair to say?
Correct.
Yeah, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but sorry. But basically, it's a staff function, and I'm looking at, based on, as well, Mr. CEO, that if with the creation of the new department, there will be certain core functions they have to complete, right?
Correct.
And one of those, if it's event management and administration, and again, I'm not trying, but that's part of it, there's certain, if that falls under the mandate and responsibility of staff, then any other resources that are attached to it, be it volunteers, a counselor, then those in fact become part of that whole particular process and protocol of delivering that event. And that's what I understand happens with Canada Day. I think with Summerfest, it's been a work in progress to figure out what's the best way of doing this without jeopardizing, or for that matter, overstating the abilities of the people that are involved, staff, volunteers, whoever else. So I'm trying to make it as clean as possible, so I understand that if it's a staff function as part of event management, then Summerfest, Canada Day, Christmas Parade, you see where I'm going with this? It's staff-driven, and with counselors, if it is a reasonable, and we are of value, and I'm not saying we're not, but we are, but if we are of value to the whole process, all relatively speaking, let me know. But I guess it's a lot different, and I wasn't trying to, disrespect our appointments to other committees, like, that's a whole other, but I think that had to come out. So in that case, if there is a value of having a counselor to sit on those specific event management groups, then I think that needs to be incorporated in this. Because we already do it in Canada Day, right? I don't know what we do with the Christmas, I'm not quite clear. That's sort of run by
It's a separate committee.
Pelham Committee, right. So maybe that's the compromise, or not, that we be consistent, that we, if we so wish, to us, my colleagues, that if we wish to have council representation on this particular committee, we should state it now. But in fact, it's a responsibility operationally of the Department of Culture and Rec to run and manage and coordinate that particular event. So the line responsibility, no different than Canada Day Festival, right? They come back, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, I just, and help me, because that to me seems to be much more logical, and I leave it, and by all means, I know what Councillor Chrissy put into that whole effort, and it was phenomenal, and all of the people involved. But we need to be very clear that these events are now, particularly with the creation of this particular department, these are responsibilities besides the parks and arenas and that. They will be handling events. And I don't want to, that's what I'm kind of gathering. That'll be one of your core management responsibilities. Is that a fair thing to say?
Through you, Mr. Chairman. That's quite true. I think that the key is that looking at the organizational changes, it's a
Right.
governance versus administrative role, to keep it as simple as we can.
Right.
And council would say through strategic planning, through this priorities and policy committee, we would like the community to have this. Canada Day, Summerfest,
Right.
Christmas, staff go and do it, report back how you're doing it. Our job is to monitor and see how you're doing. That's the model we've put in place through the procedures bylaw, through some of the organizational changes, and it only makes sense to extend that, as you say, logic to these types of committees. By no means would we want to discourage councillors from volunteering in community events. However, to have a formal council person appointed to a staff, in essence, staff responsibility committee creates conflict between the governance role and the administrative role, and that's what we're trying to suggest we don't need. We don't need to proceed that way.
Okay.
Councilor Ribbiak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I guess my example on Canada Day has been referenced a couple of times, so let me speak from my experience. I serve on two committees that Ms. Van Ravensway is very aware of. One is Canada Day, the other is Communities in Bloom. On neither of those committees have I been the chair, never tried to be. I did see my role as a liaison, as to some extent a coach, as people, volunteers in particular, wonder, can we do something or can't we? You can bring a certain level of certainty to that kind of discussion, certainly a cheerleader, to assure that people, particularly volunteers, understand that they're on the right track and they're doing a good job and ought to continue. And I think that those are valuable roles that we can play. I think that if we want the involvement of volunteers on those committees, and we clearly do, we wouldn't be successful without them, then I think that some level of involvement and interest expressed in very tangible ways by council goes a long way in that regard. We don't need to be running it. Don't even try. I'd be a dismal failure if I did. But these projects go off very, very well, and I think that there is a contribution that we can make. That's the way I see it. I would not like to see, I don't think, a withdrawal of that kind of role from committees. I think that we would lose something in that, and I'm not sure that we want to lose what we would, which I think is the great involvement, the greatest possible involvement of volunteers in these projects.
Councillor Kersey.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm reluctant to speak to this because we're dealing specifically with my involvement and the Summerfest committee, and at risk of losing the great amounts of money and jeopardizing that position, I will speak to it.
Zero dollars.
I have a couple of concerns. Some of this came out of the fact that there was indeed frustration among the committee members when it came to dealing with logistics. And I think that that's probably the case with several other committees that create events and do things in the town, is working their way through the administrative maze and getting answers in a timely basis, and so that we're not passing it from one person to the other, that there was direct communication. So the intent here of having a portion of the committee made up of finance, public works, facilities, and certainly rec and culture makes perfect sense in terms of facilitating the logistical operation of the committee, because it did cause some frustration there. My concern of flying in 5 new members to the committee and more or less taking over the committee might be read by the volunteer group that have formed the basis of this particular committee, but I think we could use the argument spreading it out over many committees, and I think that's a more healthy argument, a discussion to have here, because it will impact, if we use this as a model, it's going to impact on other committees going forward that are currently operating, and new committees that might be foreseen and operational in the future. So I guess the one thing that, first of all, you don't need all of these people at every meeting. It's a waste of taxpayers' money to have these 5 people sitting around the meeting when you're not discussing finance, or if you're not discussing at that meeting public works. So, but I do see the strength of having a backroom committee or a back office committee that would provide support, logistical support to all of the committees that may be operational in the town, whether it's Summerfest or Canada Day or what have you. So I do see great strength in that. I think that would facilitate the operations with respect to the volunteers. I think you really want to be careful about having volunteers feel that the town is coming in and taking over the work that they've done and the hours that they've put in. And I know that the proposal is not that intention. However, when I look at the makeup of the committee, there might be that feeling by some people who've given endless hours to, not just in Summerfest, but in Canada Day, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm a little concerned about that. I do echo Councillor Ribbiak's point with respect to having a liaison there. But at the same time, I also acknowledge the point made by our CAO, which basically said that, and I felt it myself at certain points in time this year when things needed to be brought to council in a speedy way, and we had to circumvent normal policy and procedure, and I know it caused undue stress for a lot of my colleagues around this table and for certainly senior management. So I can clearly understand and accept that the chairperson or the spokesperson for the committee, any committee, not be a member of council. I think that that makes perfectly good sense. That way, if there's a presentation to be made on behalf of the volunteers who make up the committee, the steering committee, whatever you want to call it, for any committee, they would come to the dais and make the presentation and be supported or not supported by the report that would come out of culture and recreation and wellness. I think it would make great sense to have one committee that would operate as a back office support team made up of, as outlined in the proposal, that would provide support to all the committees going forward. They would be the go-to. They would know the workings of those committees. They would be asked to come to those committee meetings when that particular aspect of it is being undertaken. But if you were to take a staff person to go out and knock on doors asking for funds to support this, that, or the other thing, I think the response would be entirely different than if you had volunteers doing it. So, and maybe that's not the intent, but those are my thoughts on it. I did feel the conflict between my role as councillor and my role of being involved in the committee in a very big way, but I do feel that at times it provided, I was able to provide information to the committee with respect to process. I was able to answer some questions right on the spot that might have had to come back to council to get an answer. So I think the liaison role is important. I think that's very important. If we're going to, the other thing I'm going to say, the last thing I'm going to say, is if we're going to make these changes with respect to the Summerfest committee, then you need to start looking at all of the other committees, the Canada Day committee, the non-starter future promotional committee, the beautification committee, a variety. What's our role as councillor on the library board? What's the role on the chamber or on the PBA? You know, there we act as a liaison. We don't chair. We don't, in most cases, vote. But beautification committee, I've served as the chair of that committee since its inception. So, you know, are you going to have a committee that's made up of 4 or 5 people and fly in 5 new staff people who are going to basically take over the role of making that committee function? So I have some concerns about it. I understand the logic behind it. I think it maybe could be massaged a little bit to make it a little more palatable to our volunteer group. That's my comments.
Just the only changes that are being made here is we're deleting a member of council and we're adding staff members. There's still going to be a representative from Pelham Active Transit and Pelham Business Association, so on and so forth, who are the volunteers. So this is the backbone of the committee, and I'm sure that our staff will use this backbone to the best interest of the committee in moving the process forward. So although it may be perceived as being taken over, there's still going to be this interaction, and the committee's the volunteers so appointed will certainly carry much of the load as well, because what has come from a one-day ceremony to a 4-day celebration, it's a lot of work for a committee of any size, to be honest. So delegation of responsibilities, I think, will be very important, and one of the objectives there is to divide the work so that everything can get done efficiently. So your point is well taken, Councillor Kirsty, but there still is a strong body of volunteers that will hopefully continue to offer their services to this very worthwhile endeavor. Go ahead.
Further to that, Mr. Chair, I took it from the CAO's comments that council would decide that they wanted to have a particular event, and then would give direction to staff that the staff committee would go ahead and then make it happen. that perception is not what we want, I don't think. I think our perception is that the volunteers make it happen, and the support and the staff provide support to that volunteer network. And maybe I'm splitting words, but I think there's a big difference there. There is a big difference. And so maybe we need to get some clarity from our CAO. with
I think
respect to that.
Mr. CAO has something to offer in this regard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To answer the councillor's question, I agree with the councillor that that's the role of staff, is to support and deliver an established committee by council. We just need more resources at the table. That's all we're trying to suggest. I can assure council, staff has enough work to do, let alone taking on or trying to take over a major community festival. But in order to be as efficient as we can, we just need a greater role in the process. And certainly, council's established a committee that is formed by volunteers delivering a festival, significant festival to the community. There's no intent for us to try and change that dynamic. We're simply saying we need to be more involved at the committee level so that we can coordinate and marshal our resources to deliver the best event possible with the minimal amount of disruption to the day-to-day operations in the community. So I hope that provides some clarity. But,
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I'm going to ask some questions, and I think it'll provide some clarity of my thinking. So what's being proposed is that we add a finance person, finance staff. What's the role of the finance person?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, through you, the role of the finance person is particularly in the area of procurement. Our desire is to have a corporate services or procurement person, our procurement person at the table. We do, as you're aware, the purchasing for Summerfest. It all goes through the office.
So everything to do with finance?
Everything to do with money, but particularly the purchasing of products that the festival committee uses.
And I'm satisfied with that answer, Mr. Chair. So, and what about Public Works? We have somebody from Public Works there for a reason.
Public Works is there to coordinate road closures, barricade setups, fences, etc.
Facilities?
Similar role, depending. The reason why facilities is there and Public Works, they're both in essence the same department, but it's just a matter so that we can have the resources marshaled from two geographically separate locations, particularly labor to do the setups.
What about, Mr. Chair, what about the committee membership, the volunteers? What's their role? It's not finance, right?
No.
It's not Public Works, it's not facilities. Just to go on what Councillor Papp said about clarity, and Mr. Chair, the comments of the CAO, I think the problem we have here is that by removing, we're focusing on, this is one of those focusing on the problem things, we're focusing on whether we should have a member of council there or not, and the reasons make a pile of sense because, as the CAO indicated, there could be could be a conflict between governance role and administration. I think we're going to have that problem with this committee that's being recommended. We're going to have the conflict between, I'll say, an involvement role of volunteers and administration. I think it needs to be clear exactly what we want the volunteers to do. And to Councillor Kersey's point, Mr. Chair, do the volunteers need to be there when they're talking about fundraising? Do the staff need to hear about all that? Councillor Kersey said, Mr. Chair, it was a waste of time, right? Similarly, when staff talk amongst themselves about and figure out stuff, road closures and this and that, well, a road, you just say, okay, we're going to do a road closure. I think what the challenge is here, Mr. Chair, is that we're essentially just doing one thing but it's not providing the clarity that's required. The role, to go on what Councillor Papp said about keeping it simple, what is that role of the volunteer? Okay, we have fundraising. What else do we have for the volunteer to do? Are all the volunteers not to do anything to do with procurement or money? They're not to do with facilities. What's the role of the volunteer?
Just looking historically, if I may call on the knowledge of experience that Councillor Kersey brings to the committee as it did exist, and just could you add some light perhaps to the way things did go in the past in that structure? And we'll get to you, Mr. Clark, and Councillor Clark, okay?
Certainly. I would say the volunteers are the face of the committee. I mean, they were the face to the community. They did fundraising. They did sat down and brainstormed and organized the event. They met with you know, Niagara Knights of Art, the people who were organizing that. We worked out. One of our members is a designer. He helped to design those various areas. He helped to design the arches, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Where staff was needed was to put in place all of those things that the committee felt were pertinent and important to the event, to make the event successful. So we needed to have, for example, procurement. It's a very obvious one. So we had to go through the procurement officer here in the town. We had to provide the right information, follow the procurement policy, and that was taken care of. There was some confusion and some not getting the answers as quickly as the committee wanted to move things forward. So I don't know whether that answers it to you,
Well,
but I think the description that you put forward is accurate. I mean, Public Works, we looked through Vicky to commune with the Public Works people and deal with those issues that had to be dealt with at Public Works. So would it have been helpful for the committee to have had a Public Works representative at that particular meeting when we were talking about those issues that impacted on Public Works? Absolutely. Could some of those answers have been dealt with by a committee structured as it is with the two rec people, the finance, the Public Works and Facilities at one table? Not necessarily with the volunteers. Absolutely, they could be dealing with this, and this, because a committee could, the volunteers could say, we want to do this, and this is what we see our needs are. How do we make it flow through town hall with the least impact on the normal work processes of town hall, with the greatest efficiency and the least aggravation passed back to the volunteers? I mean, the last thing we want to see is volunteers getting frustrated because of process. So I see great strength in having that there. I just don't necessarily, my concern is that they would be seen as taking over the committee, and I know the CAO is shaking his head, but we have to be very careful and cognizant how that is presented to the committee. To make a very wholesale change like this, we have to be careful.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If I can still just finish, and I know Councillor Clark wants to speak, and I certainly appreciate the answer of Councillor Kersey. So just to put some to that, he indicated fundraising, I presume bands and things like that. But really, the point that the councillor spoke of, Mr. Chair, is the broad vision for the event, and I'll call it the advisory nature of the event. So it's, should we have a teen zone? Yes, absolutely we should. Or you know what, it didn't work last year. That kind of decision. We're not going to have staff necessarily make that decision, and those decisions come about by the discussion, the involvement, the member from the PBA might say, you know what, we're gonna, or the chamber, we're gonna ask our chamber members what they think about this particular issue or whatever it is. So that's where the beauty of the volunteers come in. But if we can sort of bound that, or we certainly want to harness that, but we also want to say, okay, where is that divide? And I think that's the challenge. And so then it gets wrapped up in this discussion between whether a member of council should be there or not. So interesting question. Councillor Ribbiak asked me, do members of staff, according to this, will they vote? According to this, they will. Do we want staff voting? I don't think so. So I think this needs, quite frankly, Mr. Chair, I think this needs a little bit more work. Maybe we need to do the how might we on this to say, how might we structure this committee? Is it an advisory committee? Is it two committees? How might we structure these committees to have a successful event? I'm not sure that we have the right structure before us, Mr. Chair.
Historically, to consider it an advisory committee, I think is completely an error, because there certainly was a lot of action involved. Councillor Clark, you had a comment.
Thank you, Councillor Gurley. We've had, and I'm just going to use this Summerfest as an example, but we've had two very successful Summerfest events, and Councillor Kersey has been a predominant figure in that. And I think by us playing with that, I think we might be, and nothing against staff, but you change the chemistry, you're going to get a different effect. That perhaps we allow the design or the layout of this committee to do the third one with the intention that right after and going into it and during that there is some kind of mentoring, for lack of another word, do up a manual between everyone involved so that there's something for the next person to follow. Because the same thing we went through with Christmas in Pelham with the PBA. There was a few people running it. We wanted to get, those people didn't want to do it anymore, but we wanted the event to carry on. So we had to pass the torch. But I don't think you can do it in the drop of a hat in one meeting. I think we should be very careful because there is a very fine balance there. Vicki and her staff have put a great deal of effort into it. Everybody has, and it's been a huge success. So let's I don't try and document. I'm not sure what the phrasing of that is, but and maybe Councillor Kersey could go further in that direction. But I really think if we play with this too much, we might be disappointed.
Mr. CAO, you had a reaction to some comments that were made before. No, nothing on that? Okay, your points are well taken, Councillor Clark. Councillor Rybak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Using the parlance of our new methodology with regard to problem solving, I think we have a fuzzy situation here that staff felt existed. And I think it's been presented with a solution that staff, I think, feels would be useful in solving staff's fuzzy situation, but we haven't dealt with ours. And I think that maybe we need to go through that process a little bit. Probably this evening is not the right time. It's getting awfully late in this discussion, but I think maybe we need to deal with that one a little bit, and what may come out of the other end of that is some real understanding of how committees generally will function across the board. And what we're dealing with here is kind of a narrow proposal, and I'm not sensing that there's a consensus around it. I don't know how you feel about it. Then I think that therefore some work needs to be done with where our situation lies, understanding that staff clearly have one, and that needs to be resolved in whatever it is that we do.
You're suggesting perhaps we do the fuzzy situation and go work around the wheel then?
I would think so. If we have that and we're having difficulty coming to a quick conclusion, then clearly we all have different views, and I think that the methodology is really effective at bringing us to a single view, and I think that's what we need. I think we're looking at this from two different perspectives, and the two are not converging, if I can use that term. We're divergent, and we're moving further apart rather than closer together. And I think that the process might be very, very useful in resolving this discussion. I propose that that's our way through it. I think, Mr. Chair, that this is an extremely valuable discussion to have. We want to go forward with effective committees that use volunteers effectively and to the greatest degree possible. Any threat to that structure by feeling that somehow staff, out of the goodness of their heart and wanting to be as effective as possible, have taken over, I think may be in the end counterproductive. That's what I'm concerned about. I think that's what other councillors are concerned about as well. So maybe we ought to devote the time that clearly this deserves at our end, maybe in a future PNP, and deal with there. My suggestion.
If it's not broke, don't fix it, right?
Well, that's not what I said, Mr. Chair. I think what I'm saying is that clearly there is something broken, and staff feel that it is that there's something there that they can contribute that they're not doing their very best at, and we need to resolve that. Yeah, because I think none of these committees are going to be successful without really effective, willing staff involvement. So I think we need to resolve it, and I think we need to resolve it together. And we have a process by which to do it. I say let's use it and get there. I just don't want us dealing with our fuzzy situation ineffectively, and staffs, having resolved their issue or thinking that they have, feeling that we're in fact not supportive of them. We are. We need them involved. We need our volunteers involved. That's the situation we need to deal with.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Couple of points and a proposed way forward. I agree with Councillor Ribbiak to a certain degree, but I think Councillor Accursi has also pointed out, he said it here this evening, Mr. Chair, that there were some times where he felt awkward and kind of unsure of his role, and Councillor Accursi also indicated, and Councillor Clark talked about the chemistry of that committee, et cetera. So I think this is, although this is a extremely important committee, I think this is a solution that's required between staff and the members of this Summerfest committee. So I propose, Mr. Chair, that we get everybody on this terms of reference together, in addition, Councillor Accursi at that meeting, and run it and find out where it gets us, because all of the players that are listed here, including our council rep, would be the ones that would be able to bring the feedback to it, to say, okay, this is why finance needs to be there, it doesn't need to be there. This is why the beautification committee needs to be there, it doesn't. So that would be my proposal, Mr. Chair, that we humbly ask these individuals to get together, to sit down for an afternoon or a couple hours and run through and come up with a proposal on it, including Councillor Accursi.
The other side of that coin, Mr. Mayor, is and the way I see it, that we need the CAO there as well, because he is the one that's proposing the fact that we do need these things. So we're going to ask their opinion. But
He can be the facilitator.
We also have to have both sides that are going to say, you don't think we do, we think you do. So that's the problem solving. Mr. CAO, does that sound reasonable?
Yes, Mr. Chairman?
I don't know if we need a motion to that effect, or Councillor Papp.
We give direction, don't we?
Councillor Papp wanted to.
Yeah, we give direction in this, so if you wanted to make that as a
agree?
direction.
Yeah, Councillor Papp agrees. So yeah, I'd like to make that recommendation.
Then refer this back to your meeting.
We refer this back?
Refer it back to staff and they'll come forward after.
Okay,
Problem solving.
okay.
Yeah,
so-
refer it to staff, ask them to convene a problem-solving session that involves all the members in the terms of reference, including our council rep and whoever the CAO deems appropriate, and let's get this solved with their recommendation. It'll be a way to involve not only the staff and their thinking, but also the members of the volunteers that put this together.
Okay. Then, Councillor Papp?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Very quickly, and it would also serve as a good vehicle by which to examine other committees where councillors are involved, and sets a stage to figure out what the value is. I mean, I think it's a great suggestion, Councillor Ribbiak, and I don't want to elaborate, but there are areas where there's some, what do we actually do? Not the chamber, like some of these other standard appointments, that's different, but there are some that we've mentioned tonight, because that may clear up a lot of issues and put it into the proper perspective of what staff's role is, what council's role is, and what the community volunteers' role is, and what ultimately they're supposed to deliver. So I think it's a great suggestion.
Okay, so this is going to be referred back to staff then, and we call it deferred.
You need to have that dialogue.
Motion, okay, direction to refer this back to staff, we don't need a vote on that, or do we need a vote on that under the new direction? Because it's not actually a motion.
It is a motion.
It really should be a motion
Okay.
and voted on so that we know it's a direction of the entire committee.
Okay.
As a consensus.
Mr. Mayor, you made the motion
Yes, sir.
to refer this back to staff, and Councillor Papp seconded. Other questions or comments regarding this?
Doesn't need a second, but it's okay.
With the understanding they run the workshop, not just a referral. Yeah.
Okay. You have that, Madam Clerk?
I do.
Okay. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Yeah, we're going right now. Okay.
This is just to receive correspondence.
Okay, this is a quick one, just to move by Councillor Papp, seconded by Councillor Ribbiak, that the issue sheet for agenda item 5.2 being correspondence received from Erdwin Heineken regarding a site alteration bylaw be received for information, and the letter was received, and as pointed out earlier, we just want to make sure that this is received for information. Questions or comments on on that. Mr. Mayor?
Just a comment, Mr. Chair, and I think it'll be important when we move to the next. This individual really talks about agricultural lands that are under an ever-increasing attack by the construction industry and road builders, resulting rapidly decreasing agricultural acreage. I think it's an interesting point, talking about fertile agricultural lands. So just ask committee members to keep it in mind as we have the discussion next. Thank
And
you.
it references fertile agriculturally used lands, I think
Yes.
is the point. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, the call in motion. All those in favor? Opposed, if any, that carries. Here we go. Moved by Councillor Papp, seconded by Councillor Ribbiak, that the issue sheet and associated documents submitted for agenda item 5.3 regarding site alteration, how might we be received, and that the criteria defined for the suggested solutions regarding the matter of the site alteration be presented to council for consideration. And the process has been underway for a bit, and we have now a report back from staff, so I will ask the CAO to bring us up to speed on this, where we are in the problem-solving wheel and where we will be going tonight as well. So, Mr. CAO?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I'll just point out to council that in front of you in paper format, you have a challenge map, and then you have, it says ideas for how might we at the top of the page, and then there's 28 ideas. Those are inserts to replace what the original report was. There's just two subtle changes. On the challenge map, the middle two boxes have just been reversed. And then on the top of the next page, you'll see the change on reversing those boxes on the next page. So if you could just insert those ones, I apologize for the confusion. Going back to where we left off, council obviously went through the fact-finding process on the divergent side of things, and you'll note on the first page, down to the middle of the second page, there was 24 ideas that were, not ideas rather, there were 24 facts that council outlined with regards to the situation. Then you'll notice black squares encompassing number 1, 2, and 3, number 5, and number 18. Those were the ones that council felt needed to move forward. The matter at that point was referred to staff, and we picked up the process. And what we did at that point was step 3, problem definition, how might we? And then it indicates that the following discussion on the facts and selection of the most important facts, the following how might we statements were created by council and provided to staff to continue the process. Staff converged on the how might we's, denoted with a black box, and moved to the challenge mapping process. So what I'm saying here is that in order to keep the process going, we needed to sort of diverge on the how might we's, the 8 how might we's that came forward, and we did that, and then selected number 1, number 2, and number 5. So the most important ones: number 1, how might we not impact normal farm practices and other businesses? Number 2, how might we ensure that natural watercourses and other significant environmental features are protected? Number 5, how might we educate the public regarding the importance or need for a site alteration bylaw? And then what we did was we went forward with the challenge mapping process, which you see in front of you. I think it's fairly self-explanatory. Then moving into the ideas. There's a list of 28 ideas that we diverged on. Then we converged on, from that list, number 2, number 10, number 12, and number 15, which was educate the public on the need to protect the environment, define and protect watercourses, agricultural lands, and significant environmental features, ban importation of construction waste with the appropriate and usual exemptions, and number 15 is establish setbacks to protect heritage landscapes. From there, we felt that the recommendations were fairly clear. We arrived at them. It took a bit of time and effort to work through the process, but I'm very pleased that we've come back with the idea finding recommendations, and you'll notice that those 4 are on the flip chart paper. And then I'm pleased to return this matter back to council for their involvement in subsequent steps to the problem-solving technique.
Thank you, Mr. CAO. Everybody has a clear understanding of where we are? Councilor Riviere.
Perhaps not as clear an understanding as I would have wanted. I understand that the 4 items that resulted from the idea finding were the convergence of staff, but I'm not sure that I fully understand all 4 of those, and perhaps some thought might be given to, or some moment might be taken to explain what the significance of those are. That's part of a discussion we didn't have, so knowing how we got from point A to point B, where we were at point A and you were at point B, I don't know how that happened.
Can
So,
you elaborate on the 4, please?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I apologize to the council. I should have done that in my report. I back up and I'll maybe provide some information on that. The following ideas and how they were arrived at. Number 1, to clearly educate the public on the need to protect the environment, which includes but is not limited to watercourses, groundwater, productive agricultural land, significant heritage landscapes, and significant environmental features. When we went and worked through the process, there seemed to be a need to educate people on why the council felt it important to deal with this issue. So the education piece is that we're not doing this for some sort of hidden agenda. We're not trying to pick on people. The motivation behind the decision to proceed with an environmental protection bylaw or whatever council decides needs to be clearly educated to all members of the public so that they clearly understand the motivations behind it and eliminate confusion. The second point, to define and protect watercourses, groundwater, productive agricultural land, significant heritage landscapes, and significant environmental features really is twofold. One, the definition part of it was arrived at because we're not clear on what the jurisdiction of the town is in relation to environmental protection. We need to better determine and define what our jurisdiction is, what the jurisdiction is of the Ministry of Environment, what the jurisdiction of the federal government is, whether it be DFO or Ministry of Environment, etc., and then the various regional components, the green belt, all those other aspects. So we need to clearly define our roles so that we are not in a position of ultra vires or stepping outside of our jurisdiction. Second of all, once those have been defined, we move into the protection piece. So once we clearly understand what our mandate is and what our jurisdiction is, then we move to protect through, we would suggest as an example, through a bylaw that would protect watercourses, groundwater, productive agricultural land, significant heritage landscapes, and significant environmental features. We feel that the issue isn't so much has been termed site alteration or a fill bylaw. We feel that this is an environmental protection. That's the motivator behind dealing with the various issues in the community, is to protect the environmental significance of those features. The other part of it was number 3, ban the importation of construction waste in the community with the appropriate and usual exemptions. Construction waste is something that we recommend is not in the best interest of the community, nor is it in the best interest of the environment. That would be folded into number 2 and addressed in whatever mechanism council decided to pursue, if you do, with regards to the protection piece. And establish setbacks to protect heritage landscapes, number 4, and that ties back into the work of the Heritage Master Plan that was done, and it also ties into protecting the landscapes that preserve the rural character of the community, that preserve the the valued places that we have in the community, and protect those for future generations to ensure that those viewscapes and those landscapes are preserved. That's called for in the Heritage Master Plan, and we felt it was also important to tie that aspect into the protection of the environment. It's not only the physical environment, but it's also the viewscape environment.
Thank you. Is that, everybody clear on that now, or?
I suppose, Mr. Chair, that in our discussion to follow, we'll place priority amongst those and emphasis on those. I'll see how the process works.
Well, we're going to definitely evaluate the merits, and we're going to list criteria in order which we can properly judge. Okay, and that's part of the evaluation piece that we'll be commencing momentarily.
Good, good. I'll reserve.
Okay, we are at 9:30. I'm going to ask Madam Clerk to watch in case we get close to the 10 where we need to extend the time, or at least consider extending the time. So I'm going to move to the flip charts again, and we will record some of the issues and some of the thoughts that will come forward in the discussion. Stands up straight. We want to list all possible criteria which might be relevant to the ideas that's presented. And the ideas presented were the four features there. What are the criteria we would think are the things that we could measure these things by? Councilor Pat.
So I'll start right off the bat. Is it in our jurisdiction to regulate these? Yeah, that's right, Councilor. Yeah, just jurisdictional responsibility.
Councilor Kersey.
Ease of implementation.
Excellent.
Somebody's done this before. So it's an easy one, that's what it's an easy.
Mr. Mayor.
Cost of implementation?
Why didn't you send me on this training? I don't understand. I go to this training.
Councilor Kersey.
The impact on the original fuzzy situation.
Impact on, how might we? Is that
Pardon?
original? Okay.
Yeah, how might be, whatever.
We're diverging now, so just bring out as many points as possible. Councilor Ribbiak?
The effectiveness of the reduction or the elimination of imported waste into the community,
Effectiveness of,
the eliminating the issue of construction waste.
he's writing on rolling paper. Others? Councilor Kersey?
Staff needs for implementation.
Staff needs for implementation?
Two aspects to that. One is number, and two is education.
Tools staff would need? Okay, staff needs, I just
Staff
wondered,
needs,
could we
yeah.
define that?
Okay, number of staff needed for implementation and
Staff time or staff?
Staffing requirements?
education.
Staffing
Yeah.
requirements, yeah.
Staffing demands, how's that? And the other?
Staff education needed.
Others, Mr. Mayor?
I have two, Mr. Chair. Speed of implementation, I guess? The
Ease of implementation?
The speed.
Speed?
The speed upon which we can implement it.
And the other?
Yeah, and this might be similar to the, but I just kind of want to, we're diverging, right? So the benefit to protecting the environment.
Benefit?
Benefit to protecting the environment. Thank you.
Others? Councilor Pratt?
Does it meet the needs of our community?
Does it?
Does it meet the needs of our community? Acceptability. Not quite getting this, Gary, so, is this what we're talking about? That's the definition.
Councilor Bian?
Need for remedies,
Need for remedies. You want to explain that?
remedies, yeah. In the event that one deals with a situation and it requires a remedy of some sort, whatever that is, that needs to be part of it as well, I think.
The actual need,
The definition of remedies or the appropriateness of remedies.
okay?
And the impact on normal practices of accepted uses of the property,
Impact on,
the normal practices of permitted uses. Normal practices of permitted uses, as in normal farming practices on agricultural lands.
others? Number 12, if we can get a few more, then we can converge from that. Councilor Pratt?
It's fairness and balance.
Sorry?
Is it fair and balanced? Is it a fair and balanced approach?
Councilor Ribbian?
No. I'll reserve.
Okay. Somebody have number 14?
Is it bad luck to end on 13?
I don't think so.
No such thing as bad luck. Okay, if we can't think of others, then we can put these up, we'll go through them and
We get to vote.
select which ones we would like to list as criteria. And again, we're looking at how might we educate the public on the need to protect the environment? How might we define and protect watercourses, agricultural lands, and significant environmental features? How might we ban importation of construction waste with the appropriate and usual exemptions? How might we establish setbacks to protect our heritage landscapes? Councillor Pat.
Can I add 14, Mr. Chair?
Absolutely, absolutely. Keep going.
Does it respect landowner rights?
Why?
I think it's 15.
Oh, I see.
Did I see a 15? No?
No, sir. Sold.
Pass this down. Those are your dots.
How many dots?
Well, there's only two, I don't have to do anything.
Hey. Councilor Knapp's getting out of control.
How many we putting up?
That's right.
10%, so 1.5, let's say 2.
2 dots.
2 dots to converge. And I'll read, hopefully I can read my writing.
We can read it.
List all possible criteria which might be relevant to the ideas presented. Number 1, what is our jurisdiction? Number 2, the ease of implementation. Number 3, the cost to implement. Number 4, impact on our original fuzzy situation. Number 5, the effectiveness of removing construction waste. Number 6, staffing demands. Number 7, staffing education and training. Number 8, speed of implementation. Number 9, benefit to protecting the environment. Number 10, does it meet community needs? Number 11, appropriateness of remedies. Number 12, impact on normal practices of permitted uses, that is farming, for example. Number 13, is it a fair and balanced approach? Number 14, does it respect landowners' rights? So if everybody want to put 2 dots on there, which would they feel is the best criteria, then we'll put them down and we'll pick the best 4 or 5 or whatever we want to pick.
Just one question, Councillor Durley, if I could, just, like, there's some pretty tough decisions, we've covered a lot of ground there, maybe 3 dots? Or does that get too complicated?
Well, it doesn't matter whether we have the dot on it or not. If it is an important one, we can certainly pick it up as a criteria. What we're doing now is just something to get us focused on a converging, and if in fact, when we go over the convergence, if in fact something comes up to say, wait a minute, that brings to mind that we should look at number 5, or we could include, then certainly that's not left out. It's not, if it doesn't receive a dot, it doesn't mean we can't use it for a criteria.
No, I just want to make sure we cover
Yeah.
the ground, that's all.
You're not voting.
Not voting.
Converging. Converging. Vicky's gonna be emailing him in a minute.
What's that?
Vicky's gonna be emailing Min. They're at it again.
Okay, we have have 4 dots on jurisdiction of municipality. Who picked those, and discuss why there? Who put the 4 on there? Councilor Clark.
If we're going to wade into this, we better make sure that this is something that that it's something that we're supposed to be doing.
Okay. Who else did that? Councilor Kersey?
I think when we look at some of the things that we're evaluating, we need to know what our jurisdiction is. I think there are lots of agencies out there that have broader mandates than municipal politicians or municipal authority. So I think we need to understand that clearly.
Councilor Pratt?
Ditto. What is our ultimate control and jurisdiction in these particular matters? We need to be very clear.
I put one there as well. Not only are we looking at what the province would allow us or what somebody else would allow us, we could look at what other municipalities have done, because there are some of these things existing in other areas, so that certainly is an important one. Ease of implementation. Who picked that one?
I picked that one, Mr. Chair. I think, is it practical? Can it be done easily? I think it feeds into some of the others in terms of staff education, community education, sort of what Councillor Papp mentioned earlier of, keep it simple, stupid principle, the KISS principle.
Okay. 2 on number 5, which is effectiveness of removing construction waste. Who picked those 2?
Actually, that's 1 on 4 and 1 on 5.
Oh,
But they're
actually,
essentially,
it looks closer to 5, myself.
Well,
Okay, impact on original fuzzy situation.
yeah, I'm not sure that that different, actually, but in any event, yeah, if we don't solve the problem that got us here, then we've spent a lot of energy on nothing. And I think that it needs to be effective at resolving that core issue of the importation of construction waste into this town.
I take it that you had both those odds.
I did indeed.
Okay. Staff education training. Councilor Kersey?
I picked that one. I think it would be important if we bring any of these into play that our staff would be educated and knowledgeable with respect to the issues that they're trying to administer, and that even goes to the point of educating the public about the issues, that our staff needs training in terms of how to present effectively an educational piece and communicate that to the public. So I think that's really an important issue.
Who had the second one?
What would benefit to protect the environment?
Okay. Councilor Pratt?
Sure, Mr. Chair. Basically, what is the ultimate value of and benefit to implementing this type of bylaw or this type of protocol, and how does that measure out in protecting the environment?
And I selected that one as well. I think it's a key point, and I want to underscore it, Mr. Chair, if you'll allow me to do this.
Go ahead.
The how might we is how might we ensure that natural watercourses, agriculture, and other significant environmental features be protected? I think that was the revelation as I saw it with staff, that it wasn't, the how might we isn't, although as Councilor Rybak indicated, that's kind of what got us here. But I think many of us around the table through this discussion have been wanting to talk about that matter. That, I think, is the key criteria. How is it that these ideas that we're doing how will it protect the environment? So I want to underscore that, and I appreciate you allowing me to do so.
No problem. No problem. I picked does it meet the community needs, because there are some people that feel they need to change the site, put it higher, lower, whatever. Some people feel that if by doing that, it hurts my needs because I'm the neighbor and it could hurt my property. So the needs of the entire community need to be thought here. This is my feeling. What I do should not impact on my neighbor and vice versa. And I think that's an important fact. And we had one on impact on normal practices of permitted uses, and I think that may tie in with 10, but whoever had that dot, if they wanted to elaborate.
Yeah, that was mine.
Councilor Clark?
Just as we mentioned last time, like to provide exemptions for normal farm practices and provide exemptions for sod farmers and nurseries and any other, like, we don't want to, my opinion on it is we don't want to create another layer of red tape and make it any more difficult for people that run a business off their land. And that's why I was asking for the third dot, is because it also is 14 at the same time, that, you know, whatever this is, should respect the right of the landowners that are affected by improper dumping of fill by neighbors. It does affect their land, as, you know, so it goes back to what yours does too, like community needs, but it has to not interfere with normal business, which is what the majority of these people are here for. That, to me, is the single most important thing in the whole thing.
Reduce impact on individuals, no matter where they stand.
That's right. I mean, if you're in the business of a nursery or a landscape company or a sod farm or a normal farm, and you've got to, because I've had phone calls from different people where they want to dig ponds as part of just the normal maintenance of a pond, or they want to set up an area to grow a certain type of tree or bush or plant, or set a greenhouse, whatever. It should not interfere with it. Now, that's not to say that they don't say, okay, look at, here's what we're doing. We're going to, you know, I've got, well, I don't know how to put it, but and I'm not going to get into that fine of detail right now, but just, it has to not interfere and create another layer or another hoop for the business community to jump through.
Okay, can we perhaps look at, that doesn't even have a dot, but it is an important one by this conversation, but these seem to be connected in a way, so can we perhaps tie them together and use a terminology that, it doesn't matter what the dot, because if it's important, we're still gonna use it. How about mitigate negative impact on individuals? And that's sort of a broad statement, but again, that would take into account an individual who wants to do a pond and a guy who is doing business legally and rightfully on his property and so on. Would that capture your thoughts there, Councilor Clark?
Yeah, that's where it gets difficult, right? Like you dig a pond, you got 100 truckloads of dirt you got to deal with. So where do you put it, right? Maybe your neighbor wants it for, you know, something. I mean, maybe that might be something where, you know, just, you know, and then there's maintenance of these waterways too, right? Like, and the perfect example, we got one in our own backyard that belongs to us, that Cherry Ridge Pond. That's all gonna get dug out. Where's all that fill going? You know, so we have to be very careful where we go with this and how, it's a very, very difficult situation. I know that, but I just want to, again, just have it not interfere with the course of business. So if a farmer has to dig out a pond that's, you know, got 15 years of silt in it and it's only 2 feet deep now, and he needs it deeper to keep the water temperature down for the plants that he's watering or whatever, I don't know, or for watering his animals, he should be able to do that without any grief. I don't know how we're going to make that work, but that's the way it should be.
The criteria, one piece is difficult to pin up criteria on this suggestion as it's going. Councilor Papp, you had a thought process.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just trying to pull all this together into sort of a statement of, and you were picking up on mitigating the rights and practices of the individual, which has legal implication, individual being the property owner, the land rights of that, is trying to pull all that together. I need to think a little bit more, but I know where Councillor Clark's going with this, is that we do not want to be seen, and nor do we want to be handcuffing or, how can I say, controlling every possible practice that is, quite frankly, acceptable and within the normal confines of practices, whether it's farming or some other related business. So I guess maybe mitigating the rights, I'll figure this out. I'm just trying to figure out a statement that would capture that, but you're
Okay.
right.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I think it's more, what I'm hearing, Mr. Chair, is more about the impacting on normal farm practices. That's what Councillor Clark spoke about. And then I'll say business practices, which is really agricultural. And he spoke about sod farming, he spoke about nurseries. That was my understanding of what those were about. So, you know, if whether impact on normal farm practices and other agricultural uses, that's what I'm hearing, Mr. Chair. I think if you, with all respect to Councillor Papp, if you put in some of those other things, then you're getting into the neighbor versus neighbor realm. Whereas I think and that's why I thought it was such a benefit to see the how might we is about of protecting the environment. So normal farm practices, agricultural practices.
We are coming dangerously close to our curfew by our bylaw, so I'm going to ask for a mover and a seconder that the rules of procedure as contained in the Town of Pelham procedural bylaw be suspended, and that the specified meeting curfew time of 10 o'clock be and is hereby waived, and that the remainder of the business listed on the agenda for this meeting continue to be considered until all matters have been concluded, or until set time of 10:30, whichever occurs first. And I have mover and seconder, Councillor Clark. Councillor Pat. All in favor? Opposed, if any? It carries, and we will proceed or continue. Pass it over to Nancy.
Perhaps, perhaps Councillor Durley, like I'm not that overly familiar with where we're going with this format that we're solving our problem with here, but perhaps that just needs to be rephrased, and then that be one of the things that staff deal with. Like, we're very close on that, impact on normal practices of business, of farming or business. But just to include that we don't create, you know, another layer. The wording on this is gonna be so difficult. I already know that, but
Again,
let's just put it in there for now, and we'll see where it plays out.
Yeah, this is a criteria that's going to help. We're going to turn this back to staff with the criteria, looking at, would that help us to educate the public as far as the environment's concerned, and all of this. So what we're looking at is the means by which, or the importance of these factors in dealing with our how might we's. That's the whole issue.
Could we not add to 12 then and say, okay, impact on normal practices or permitted uses, i.e. farming / business, and then underneath that, not to create more red tape.
Farming and so on, so we'll add everybody.
Yeah,
Less red tape.
less red tape. Okay.
That work?
Yeah. I don't know, I'm not I'm not
No,
familiar enough
Mr.
with
Clark
this process.
is saying that we're not only worrying about impacting on farming, but we're looking at other uses and eliminating, or at least not creating more red tape in order for people to do things. That's one of the criteria.
Box it, Mr. Chair, just box it, and it can be one of the criteria, and
Okay,
I
what
think we
wanna
should
do
move
is put
on,
the
right?
floor. Councillor Kirsty, you had it?
I think we box respect of landowners' rights. That's really a criteria that we're going to use to evaluate the 4 how might we's that are up there, which really already talk about normal farm practices and all of that, defining them and protecting them. So I think what we're getting confused with, we're trying to create how might we's when we should be developing evaluation criteria.
Exactly, okay, exactly, and all of these things fit into that box, I guess, eh, really. 'Cause it's
Mr. Chair,
exact.
can I ask, like, nobody selected that. So how does it have a box around
Conversation,
it?
Mr. Mayor, what we're looking at, does it meet the community needs? That's my rights and your rights, okay? Does it impact on normal property rights or normal practices? That's my right to
I guess
operate
I'm
my
looking
farm
for
as
the, can we hear from Councillor Kersey? Mr. Chair, with,
I'm just trying to bring, I just tried to bring a little bit of clarity to the discussion that was going on here. It seemed to me we were using a how might we to evaluate a how might we instead of developing an evaluation criteria, which is what this exercise is all about. We already have a how might we, which talks about normal practices and uses, defining them, protecting them. It's all, that is the how might we. So now the question is, how do we evaluate that in the most effective manner? So we don't evaluate that by putting the same thing up there and evaluating with that. That's all I think.
But
we can do whatever
and
I
I,
want.
well, no, and I agree, and that, to me, 14's a how might we. So the criteria is something like ease of implementation, effective,
Why don't we just
benefit.
box them and see what we come up
Okay,
with here?
sounds
We've been
good.
beating around the bush here a million times.
Okay, it seems like everybody felt we need to explore the jurisdiction limits that we do have, so. Ease of implementation.
I thought it was important.
Factor in that?
Yeah.
Yes, okay.
We need more
Any others?
Well, solving the initial issue, I think, is very important.
Impact on the original fuzzy situation.
And I think 9 will go into 4.
What, 9 is?
9 will go into 4, Mr. Chair, because the original fuzzy situation is the environment. How do we protect the environment?
Yeah.
Yeah, 5 goes into 4 as well.
All right, let's try it.
Well,
Okay.
should we just note that into 14 goes a number of those others, 13, 12?
Yeah, it would cover all those.
Yeah, so just that we note that, so that we have a common definition.
And I would argue that, I guess it's 6 and 7
Right.
would fit into ease of implementation.
Exactly.
Because that's,
And the cost.
yeah, and cost too, probably.
Speed going there as well?
Speed as well, ease and speed of implementation,
those are the
cost.
4.
And cost go in there too.
What's it gonna cost to implement it?
What's the next step?
That's it.
Okay,
we
we're
got
gonna
it.
put these here, we're gonna weigh them,
Okay.
Okay.
and then we're going to decide and pass it back to staff for a little more work.
It's okay.
Wish we had a smart board right now. That'd be nice.
Smart board into the project.
Wish we had a projector that worked and just put it on the screen.
That would work too.
We should move our chairs up there. I can't see any of that stuff.
We can get closer.
Why don't we, let's go stand up there. We say whether it's a 3, a 2, or 1.
Okay.
The Pinto, no, that. What kind of car do you like? You like the roomy? This is your criteria. And this is the same as mine.
Now, we're gonna go down the list. If it's an excellent criteria, we'll give it a 3. If it's a good criteria, we'll give it a 2. If it's a fair criteria, we'll give it a 1. And if it's not any good, we'll give it a 0. Jurisdiction on the municipality, the impact on how might we educate the public on the need to protect the environment. Would the jurisdiction piece be easy or hard?
Is it,
Be excellent, good, fair, or poor?
So the question, if I may, just to understand the process, so we're asking whether that idea meets that criteria well? Is that the question?
Is it a good criteria in order to judge the education piece? Would it be easy or or hard to implement the criteria?
So, Mr. Chair, the criteria is jurisdiction of the municipality.
We need to know our jurisdiction.
Yeah, so is educating the public on the protecting the environment, is that, how do you, Mr. CAO, maybe the CAO can help us on this.
Mr. Chairman, you can interpret it as, does the town have the jurisdiction to educate the public? Or you could say, literally the way it's written, which is I think the intent is this our jurisdiction or not? What is our jurisdiction? So I would say that if you're holding that up against, is it the jurisdiction of council and the community to educate the public? Sure it is.
Would it be difficult for us to determine if we do have the jurisdiction?
No.
Yeah, so I think to that, it's, part of that is within the jurisdiction of the municipality, it's educating, you'd say, okay, this is in our jurisdiction, this isn't, so. I think it's either a 2 or a 3.
Yeah, it's a 2 or a 3.
That's it. Do we or don't we? That's what I say to Gary.
Two?
I'd say a 2.
Consensus?
Yep.
Jurisdiction, how might we define and protect watercourse, agricultural lands, and significant environmental features? Our jurisdiction?
Can you tell John to?
I'm lost.
Say it again, John, sorry.
Sorry.
How might we define and protect watercourses, agricultural lands, and significant environmental features? Is that within our jurisdiction?
Yes. Within our jurisdiction, is that the question?
Protect? I think is it important for us to protect these issues?
I'd say a
That's our
2 or
jurisdiction.
Or a 3?
2.
Then we can decide whether we're going to be able to.
I am hearing 3, I'm hearing 2.
I'm not finding the question correctly.
2.
2.
2. How might we ban the importation of construction waste with the appropriate and usual exemptions? Is that within our jurisdiction?
Yes.
That's a
That's a
3.
3.
We would know.
How might we establish setbacks to protect our heritage landscapes? Is that within
That's
our jurisdiction?
That's within our jurisdiction.
3?
3.
Ease of implementation. How might we educate the public on the need to protect the environment? That'd be easy.
2.
2? How might we define, protect watercourses, agricultural land, significant environmental features? That'd be easy to implement.
Is that the criteria?
1 or a 2? What do you think?
I think 2. Yeah, be
2?
tough.
How might we ban importation of construction waste with the appropriate and usual exemptions? Would that be easy to implement?
Yeah?
I think so.
Easy to implement, difficult to enforce?
Yeah.
That's what we were told the last
Well,
time.
enforcement's not one of the criteria, Mr.
I know.
Chair.
We call it a 2.
Why? Who said 2?
How might we establish, who said 2? I heard 2 there.
I think 2 is good.
We were saying 3 at this end. That's
Gone 3? Okay, 2 or 3?
2.5.
2.5? I'd go with 2.5.
How might we establish
Don't tell
setbacks
me.
to protect our heritage landscapes? Would that be easy to implement?
I think that's a,
Well, we would have the right to do that.
to me, Mr. Chair, that would be
Like NPCA. or
difficult, because I don't know exactly what that, protect our heritage landscapes, we'd probably have to go through a study. I mean, we have the study, but we'd have to amend, like,
Could be part of the zoning.
I think it'd be a 1 or a 2, so if a 2 is a 2,
It could be
you know,
part of the zoning bylaw too.
yeah.
So that's,
I think it's a
give
2.
it a 2, and then we'll figure out if it's a 3 later.
We got everything's 2.
What about the opposite
That's
way?
called the middle of the
How
road.
might we educate the public on the need to protect the environment? Would this impact on the original fuzzy situation?
Which is protecting the environment, right? So, educate,
Would the education
2?
impact on the fuzzy situation?
It might clarify it.
You can't say for sure.
You can't
Clearly
know for
educate
sure,
the
but it
public.
Definitely add some clarity to it.
And the criteria is, it's hard to read, Mr. Chair.
Impact on original fuzzy situation.
which is protecting the environment.
Yeah, I would say that's closer to a 3, isn't it? Like they're really related to one another. Can't do one without the other.
3?
You can't lead a horse to water.
Sure.
Sure.
How might we define and protect watercourse, agricultural land, significant environmental features? Is that an impact on our?
Yeah, that's a 3.
That's a 3,
Definitely hitting it.
That's a definite 3.
because that's where we were.
How might we ban importation of construction waste with the appropriate usual exemptions? Does that impact on the budget
It's a
situation?
3.
That's a 3.
How might we establish setbacks to protect our heritage landscapes? Would that impact on the original fuzzy situation?
That's a little less.
2.
2, yeah,
Two.
2.
Does it respect landowners' rights? How might we educate the public on the need to protect the environment?
3.
3, for sure.
How might we define and protect watercourse, agricultural lands, and significant environmental features? Does it respect landowners' rights?
3.
It's 3,
Yeah, 3.
Yeah.
because we'd have to examine our, yeah, 3.
3?
Yeah.
How might we ban importation of construction waste with the appropriate usual exemptions? Does that respect landowners' rights?
Yeah, because the exemptions are there. I think it's a
all
3.
about. You have 3.
3?
Yeah, with the exemptions.
Yep.
How might we establish setbacks to protect our heritage landscapes? Would that respect the landowners' rights?
I think that's a 2.
That's a 2, I'd say.
Yeah, depending on what the, yep,
Shows you how difficult the situation is.
Okay.
Not much
it's good, John,
divergence
very good.
in scoring.
Now we gotta pick.
What are you doing for time?
We're looking at their, all important, we're gonna turn this back to staff, but we're looking at the importance of, first of all, looking at what's coming into our town, educating the public on what we're doing and how we're doing it, why we're doing it, and the protection pieces are both together. So we send this back to staff.
So, Mr. Chair, so it seems that really the question before us is which idea do we want, or ideas do we want staff to come back to us with, right? So these are, we're evaluating and selecting. So select the best idea to the solution and start working on it. So I guess the question is, do we want all 4 ideas, or 2 or 3 or 1? So, you know, I'm comfortable with all.
They're all scoring pretty closely. Now,
Yeah.
the education piece has developed a lot of interest. The banning the importation of construction waste really
Yeah.
sort of topped the scale as far as our discussion here was
That's
concerned.
the idea.
The other 2 are about equal as well. So again, there seems to be a little bit of vagueness, if I will, about the protecting our heritage landscapes, and that maybe we should have looked at it a little more precise. Mr. CEO, perhaps.
Mr. Chairman, just to provide some clarity, I think that, it would be an option for council to take the 4th idea, maybe defer it back to the Heritage Group for some comment. It is a heritage issue that came out of the Heritage Master Plan as a suggestion. And then they can make some recommendations on that. The other 3 certainly could go, straight back to staff to begin implementation.
So we can refer this to the Heritage.
It's a recommendation just for council's information, that's all.
Because they certainly could have some good ideas on it. Councilor Hurst?
I was also going to suggest that perhaps we just focus on the define and protect and the ban importation, because the educate the public really will come in as part of the action plan developed around those ideas.
Yeah.
Because that'll be a piece of the process.
Yep.
So it's almost part of an action plan. So I would say if we could get staff to focus on those 2 particular items, that would really help to bring clarity to the issue.
Okay, so we're looking at bringing consensus on that. We're looking at sending back to staff to define and protect the
For action.
environment, and also the banning the importation of construction waste. These are the 2
Mr. Chair, that makes a pile of sense to me, that those 2, we're essentially what we're doing, we're referring to staff. We're directing staff to work on that and come back to us at appropriate times. In one case, it looks like it might be a bylaw and, you know, et cetera. And then I agree with Councillor Kersey, education is part of that action plan. And then the other is to forward the last one to the Heritage Committee and get them to work on it. So if you want to make that motion.
We put that staff direction, can we include that in the minutes, Madam Clerk? Okay, and this one we'll put on the back burner until we're dealing with these two, so what we'll do is circle these.
Good.
Just defer to the next meeting. You want to get into a new topic now. You want to
Back to staff for
We think alike.
December,
For planning and action.
Next count?
December, January.
December.
Mr. CAO, what would be a possible time frame for this to come back? The end of December or first of January, or?
It would go to Cal, Committee of the Whole.
Cal.
Yeah, I would say it's going to take, I would say January, to be realistic.
Cal would be the next council meeting in Cal, so that would be too soon. Then P&P is not going to be held in December, so the first Cal in January.
I would suggest that it maybe come to the January P&P committee meeting, just to stay consistent, and it will buy us a little more time to get the work done. It's hard for me to say, Mr. Chairman, honestly, because I don't know what our jurisdictions are. I don't know what the stuff is yet.
Okay.
It could be really easy, or it may be challenging. I don't know. But I will need some time regardless.
Okay, so we'll do it to the.
Tentatively, yeah.
meeting in 2013.
I would suggest the PNP, the first PNP meeting of 2013.
At the latest.
Does that work?
Can I just interject? Can we have those advance as they're developed? For example, number 3 is pretty much written, as I understand it. It was meant to be proposed some time ago, or if not in that particular format, then pretty close to final, as I understand it. Do we need to deal? Wait for both for a month and a half?
bring them back
Can
when
we
you're ready.
can we split those and
Yep.
work one and then the other? I mean, since much of the work is done, as I read in the documentation that was provided to our last PNP.
I'm looking at, Mr. Chairman, to answer the councilor's question, I'm looking at incorporating 2 and 3 as one document. So I guess I'm not sure about the question of coming back with something first. I would say basically what I'm thinking right now is some form of an environmental protection bylaw that includes that provision in it, along with very clear definition of what our jurisdiction is. So it would be one document that I would come back with.
So what you're saying is come in with the total document rather than piecemeal?
That's what I am thinking.
Makes sense.
I might ask Mr. Larmer's opinion on that, but that's my thoughts with the most effective way to deal with it.
I would, I think, Mr. Chair, I think staff should, look at that, and let's not close the door on that, because these are separate ideas, so separate action plans might be required.
We can certainly look at that, Mr. Chairman. I'm not saying we can, I'm just saying I'm envisioning it a different way. If there's a practical way of doing them separately, certainly we'll be as expeditious as possible, and if that's something that we feel is a good recommendation, council will certainly make it.
A lot of that will hinge on.
Right.
jurisdiction
That's
piece
what they're
of
gonna do.
investigation.
Why are we doing that?
Yep.
If we can't do it, what's the point of putting it together?
Okay, that direction is clear then, and the consensus is there?
Call the question.
These two this goes to the Heritage Advisory Committee for some discussion to come back to P&D,
Yep.
Yes.
or to come back to COW.
Got to come
Somewhere, somewhere in January. We'll figure out where, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Yeah, we'll give it to them, they're meeting the middle of December, so we can pass that direction along to them. This one will follow on the heels of the report that comes through. Okay, thank you very much.
Good stuff.
a,
We need to vote, don't we?
We haven't called the question on that.
oh, okay.
We just need a vote on that
Okay, moved by
by the mayor. You
the
don't need a
mayor.
seconder or not.
Don't need a seconder. And read the motion, please.
That items 2 and 3 be referred to staff, and that staff be directed to work on these items and return a report to the January Policy and Priorities Committee for the planning and action recommended, and that item number 4 be referred to the Heritage Committee for review and report to the January PNP meeting.
All clear?
First, I guess it's understood, Mr. Chair, the first one's going to form part of an action plan. no doubt, so.
Okay, all clear? No questions or comments? Call the question, all in favor? Opposed, if any, that carries.
I got 6 minutes.
10 minutes. Councilor Pat.
Mr. Chair, with your indulgence and with the agreement of my colleagues, I would ask that items 6.1, 6.2, 6.3, and 6.4 be deferred to a future meeting of either, I guess.
PNP.
PNP. In the interest of time, I know there's a lot we need to discuss, and I don't think we can give it due justice this evening, so I would ask that these items be deferred to a future meeting.
Yes, we have only
The remainder of the agenda?
the remainder of the agenda, which goes from the Christmas closing policy down to the human resources piece.
Deal with the Christmas closing?
That's not,
That's not,
that's not this year.
Oh, it's for 2013.
it's for 2013, it's not
Right.
for this year.
Okay, so that's, with 6 or 7 minutes left to go, that's,
May I?
go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple of items that flow, I think, a little bit from the discussion we just had. I think it's pretty clear that the consensus of council is that we're going to be moving ahead. I wonder if we can take whatever action is appropriate to kind of tell the world that we're moving ahead on this thing, so as to make this part of, I guess, the background noise in those industries that tend to move waste around, and maybe that would encourage some to think twice about moving that into Pelham, just as a matter of information and not as.
Mr. Chair, point of order. We
Yes,
kind of
I-
moved away from that, and we're now on a motion, I think, from Councillor Papp with the rest of the agenda.
Yeah, and until such time as that report comes back, I would be reluctant to do that. But Counselor Papp, you want to put that in a form of motion to actually basically suspend the remainder of the PNP agenda for this evening?
That's correct. I would request that we suspend the remainder of the agenda of PNP, and we deal with it at a
Future PNP.
future PNP meeting.
Okay.
Motion to adjourn.
No, you gotta
All those
call
in
it.
favor? Opposed, if any? That carries. Moved by Councilor Ribbiak, seconded by Councilor Papp, that this regular meeting of the Policy and Priorities be adjourned until the next regular meeting, being the Committee of the Whole, scheduled for Monday, December 3rd, 2012, unless sooner called by the mayor. All in favor? Opposed, if any? That carries. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.
You have budget binders? All right.
This.
Very much, Mr. Chairman. That was good.
Thank you,
Good job.
Mr. CEO.
Yeah, I thought I